Lift the flat stone at the edge of your garden bed right now and look closely before you let it drop back down. Among the gray, armored bodies scattering in every direction, there is a chance you're looking at something most people who have handled these animals their entire lives have never actually noticed. Turn one over, gently, just for a second, cradling its small curved body in your palm the way you might hold something you were not yet sure you should be touching. On the underside of certain individuals, tucked between the legs, there is a pale, slightly swollen pouch, faintly visible through the joints of the exoskeleton, pulsing with something that looks almost like it is breathing. It is. That pouch is filled with water, carried on dry land by an animal whose ancestors left the ocean tens of millions of years ago and never fully let go of it. Inside it, dozens of eggs are developing in a private aquatic world her body manufactures and maintains, drop by drop, for weeks, on the underside of a creature you were about to tip back into the dirt without a second look. Let's talk about what is actually happening inside that pouch, because the biology is stranger than almost anyone expects from an animal this small and this common. The structure is called a marsupium, and despite the name's familiar association with kangaroos, what is happening inside a pill bug's version of it is closer to something out of an aquarium than a nursery. The pouch is sealed and filled with a fluid the mother produces and actively regulates, a private internal ocean she carries on dry land specifically because her eggs, even now, after millions of years of her lineage living entirely on soil, still cannot develop the way a true terrestrial egg does. They need water around them, the same as the ancestors of this entire group needed water around every stage of their lives before a remarkable evolutionary event some 160 million years ago allowed isopods to leave the ocean for soil while keeping just enough of the sea with them to make reproduction possible. Every female pill bug carrying eggs is, in a very real sense, hauling around a small, sealed tide pool, regulating its chemistry, replenishing its moisture, keeping a piece of the ancestral ocean alive against her own body while she goes about the rest of her day completely indifferent to the boulder you just lifted above her head. I remember the first time I read a detailed description of what happens inside that pouch once the eggs hatch, and having to read the sentence twice because it did not seem like something that could be true of an animal you find under a flower pot. The newly hatched young, pale, soft, barely formed, do not leave the marsupium immediately. They remain inside it for days, sometimes weeks, and during that time the mother feeds them. Not through anything resembling milk, and not through anything most people would consider appetizing, but through her own waste, deposited directly into the pouch, rich in partially digested organic material that gives newly hatched young a nutritional head start before they ever face the outside world on their own. Let that settle for a moment. This is genuine parental provisioning, sustained, deliberate, and biologically costly to the mother, occurring inside an animal that almost everyone in your household has, at some point, flicked off a patio chair without a flicker of consideration. But the pouch only exists at all because of something that happens earlier, a courtship ritual entomologists call the nuptial ride, and it is unlike anything else most people picture when they imagine insect or crustacean mating behavior. A male, having located a female through pheromone trails detected by sensory hairs on his antennae, climbs directly onto her back and simply holds on, sometimes for mere seconds, sometimes for days at a stretch, waiting for her body to reach the precise physiological window in which mating becomes possible. He does not feed during this time. He does not leave to find another mate. He commits entirely to one female, riding on her back through her daily movements beneath the same stone, until her body signals readiness, an investment of time that, for an animal with a lifespan measured in a few short years, represents a genuinely significant gamble on a single reproductive opportunity. And there is one more detail about pill bug biology that deserves attention here, because it explains why the timing of all of this matters so much. Unlike most arthropods, which molt their entire exoskeleton in a single event, pill bugs shed their shell in two separate phases, first the back half of the body, then, roughly 2 days later, the front half. During the brief window between those two molts, the animal is genuinely vulnerable, its new exoskeleton still soft and uncalcified on one half of its body while the other half remains hardened. It is precisely during this fragile period that mating most often occurs, meaning the entire reproductive process, the nuptial ride, the molt, the marsupium filling with fluid, is timed around a narrow biological window in which this small, armored animal is, briefly and necessarily, not fully armored at all. And there is something else happening on the underside of that same body, something connected to the very water that fills the pouch in the first place. The pale, slightly spongy patches you may have noticed on a pill bug's abdomen, easy to mistake for damage or disease, are organs called pleopotal lungs, structures that function the way gills once did in this animal's aquatic ancestors, except now adapted to pull oxygen directly from humid air rather than water. They only work if kept consistently moist, which is the entire reason pill bugs retreat to damp, dark spaces and why finding large numbers of them under a stone or a pot tells you something specific and useful about your garden. It tells you the soil beneath that object holds enough consistent moisture and organic richness to support a respiratory system that, biologically speaking, has 1 foot still in the ocean. That same biology explains the diet that makes pill bugs so quietly valuable to the soil around your plants. They are detritivores, feeding on decomposing leaves, rotting wood, and decaying organic material, breaking it down into forms soil bacteria and fungi can process further. A garden bed with a healthy pill bug population beneath its mulch is processing dead plant matter back into usable nutrients faster than a bed without them, and doing it continuously, in the dark, at no cost to you. But it is what happens when that same feeding behavior intersects with contaminated soil that has drawn the most serious scientific attention. Lead, cadmium, zinc, and other heavy metals accumulate in urban and suburban soils over decades from old paint, vehicle exhaust, and treated wood, and unlike organic pollutants, they never break down on their own. Research has identified specialized cells in the pill bug's digestive tract that actively bind these metal ions, drawn in along with the organic material the animal eats, and lock them permanently into mineralized granules stored inside the body rather than excreted back into the environment. Studies examining pill bug populations in contaminated sites have found measurably higher concentrations of these metals within the animals themselves compared to the surrounding soil, direct evidence that the metals are being actively withdrawn from circulation rather than simply passing through. The pill bug is not simply living in your soil. It is quietly filtering toxic metals out of it and sequestering them in a form that cannot re-enter the food chain, one small, dark-loving body at a time. Now think back to the underside you turned over a moment ago, and to the defensive curl this animal is famous for, the instant transformation from a flat, scattering shape into a perfect, sealed sphere the moment it senses threat. That sphere is not a simple panic response. The overlapping armor plates running across its back are precisely engineered to interlock when the body curls, producing a structure with no exposed seams, no vulnerable points, and a surface that distributes outside pressure evenly rather than concentrating it anywhere a predator's jaws or claws could exploit. Engineers studying impact-resistant structural design have looked specifically at this rolling mechanism as a model for flexible armor in robotics and protective equipment, which means the animal you find curling defensively under your boot has a body architecture good enough to interest aerospace researchers, in addition to everything happening on the underside of that same shell. So the next time you lift a stone, a pot, or a piece of forgotten garden wood and find them scattering beneath it, take 1 extra second before you let everything drop back into place. Turn one over if you can do it gently. You may catch sight of a small pale pouch carrying a private ocean on dry land, sustaining young that depend entirely on a respiratory and reproductive system this animal has been quietly perfecting since long before flowering plants existed. Put the stone back down slowly, and leave the leaf litter and damp mulch nearby undisturbed if you can. There is more happening underneath it than almost anyone walking past it will ever stop to notice. Have you ever turned one of these small armored animals over and noticed a pouch on its underside, or watched one curl into a perfect, sealed sphere and wondered exactly how it managed it? Tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one, and the small discoveries people share after looking closely at something this common never stop surprising me. And if you want to understand another creature carrying a piece of an ancient, vanished world inside its own body, hidden in plain sight in your garden right now, the next video is already waiting for you.